When people are starting building projects, they often don't know what to do. And maybe they've been told to hire an architect as a first step. And very often, the people that I see end up spending $20,000, $25,000 and feel like they didn't get anything out of that. And or maybe they're being asked or told you should hire a contractor. But then the contractor's just saying, well, what do you want me to build? I need to, look at something to give you a price beyond like a very high level price. And so that's really all about managing a team and managing the process of construction. And when you look at it, it's a little bit more complicated than you might realize. I see a lot of people who are just hoping that their building project goes well. They don't really realize the sheer number of people that are involved, even in a small project. And the way that you can't control people, but you do have to make sure that they're all playing by the same rules, that the expectations are aligned, that the goals are aligned, and all that kind of thing. Because if it doesn't go smoothly, that's when it becomes apparent how big of a problem it is. And so it's important to sort of read the tea leaves as you're managing this project because it is all about these relationships and the way that we, as the project owner, are able to guide our project along the way through the sort of inevitable twists and turns of every project. Every project has that, but with a good team to make sure that you're managing the situation up and down the hierarchy, all the way up to you as the owner, so that you can get the best project that you can, as close to your budget and as close to on time as possible. And so we're going to talk about that in this video. So if this is you, the happy project owner or soon to be project owner, what often happens is that someone will tell you, oh, you have a building project, you're making a building, you're trying to get a space put together for your business, you need to hire an architect. And then someone else might say, oh, well, actually, you need to hire a contractor because they're the ones who actually build it. They're the ones who talk about price. They're the ones who own the schedule, all that kind of stuff. And in reality, what the contractor is going to say is that they're just going to ask questions as in, what is it that you're trying to build? And then your architect also is going to be asking the same questions. But, the way that I often see it happening is that the architect isn't asking the right questions. They're not giving the client what they actually are asking for. They're doing things that are too expensive. They're doing things that is in their interest over the client's interest. And I'm sure a lot of you out there have felt that way. And so, you also might have some sort of other specialty vendor, like if you're making, I'm working on pickleball courts right now, or climbing, or fitness, or whatever it is. There's all sorts of specialty vendors that are also involved in certain projects, but most of the ones I work on. So the architect also has engineers. They probably have a mechanical engineer. They may have a structural engineer. They may have a lighting consultant. They may have an expediter or a legal consultant of some sort. And so all of these different people, and depending on the size of the project, that may be a whole bunch of people. And this is a group of people that you want your architect to be managing because very quickly you can see how it grows very quickly. And you also have a similar situation with your general contractor where you've got all of these subcontractors doing the different divisions of work. And I'm underrepresenting that here because even on a small project, you've got paint and metal work or carpentry and drywall and this and that. And what also happens though, is that any one of these subcontractors, they may have subcontractors for them. So for instance, somebody who's supplying the materials, somebody who's actually being brought in to help them with a very specific part of the project, like whatever it is. And then even these people may have suppliers and vendors and things like that. And so you end up with this sort of like network of people who are related to each other that are not even necessarily maybe it's even the same group. It doesn't really matter. It's this group of people who are networked together, and all of it is going up to you. Because in this scenario that we're outlining here, and we're about to get into the good stuff, these are the contracts that you have directly as the owner. So these are the contracts. The contractor themselves will have these other contracts and down the line. And again, depending on the project, depending on the specialty, depending on the complexity, these can be, it can be a few people, it can be a lot of people, but even in a simple project, it often is a whole bunch of people. And the issue that often happens is that, if you end up with a contractor who is in a situation, we're going to start with the sort of Peter to pay Paul model here. So red flag number one. Flag. All right. So in the Peter to pay Paul model, you might have a contractor here who is actually taking money from you and sending it somewhere else because they're not necessarily keeping tabs on things. They might have projects that they are having trouble with. Maybe they're behind. Maybe the payment is late on this other project. Something that is completely unrelated to you, but then ripples its way up to you. And this is the kind of thing that then all of a sudden, you're feeling that. I've seen this happen where, why isn't the contractor performing properly? Where'd my money go? Why are they not on site as much as they should be? It very well could be something completely unrelated to you that is having a potentially like huge impact on you. Because if your contractor goes down over here, guess who starts to feel the pain upstream? It's you, because if they're not doing okay financially just across the board, then they may have a real problem that needs to be dealt with. And the way that we counteract this is that we track the money, right? We keep an eye on it. And we do this with requisitions monthly and oversight. And what I mean by that is like, this is a process in itself. And the architect is involved in this, but fundamentally what we're doing is we're keeping an eye on things so that you are able to see what's going on and you're able to make sure that your exposure is never more than 1 month of your cash. And we do that by doing monthly payments, by not paying too much upfront. These are all red flags that if you start seeing them, too much money up front. If that's too much, or, just questions about where they are, these are all red flags. You also have situations where even people who aren't behaving poorly, the architect has other clients, the engineer has other clients, the contractor has other clients, and these people need attention as well. Unless you're so valuable or such an important job, these people are all figuring out their own stuff, as are the engineers. And, part of the thing is that the more that these contracts sort of get pared down to the bare bones, and, this is not the owner's problem. It becomes the owner's problem, but really, maybe some of them even overlap because a lot of engineers and architects work on similar projects. The fact that these fees are so low means that people need to have, they'll have you as a client, but then they'll have, these other people. So in the architect, maybe they're working on, 3 to 5 projects at any given time, maybe, more or less, doesn't really matter. The point is that when there's an issue over here, again, it ripples its way up to the architect. And if you're asking for something, guess what? It's rippling its way back and forth to you. And so now you have a situation where this person is maxing out. If they don't have staff, that's a question. That's always a question for me. It's very rare that I recommend a sole practitioner for bigger commercial projects, even small commercial projects, because of exactly this. What happens when there's a problem? Who's available? What if they're just on vacation? What if they are the sole practitioner, but they're on vacation? Whatever the case is. And honestly, it may even be something that affects the engineer that you don't even really know, like the civil engineer, but then all of a sudden you're waiting on your site plan for some zoning or whatever it is, but this engineer is like stressed out so badly over here, and this client is just freaking out, or maybe this is such an important client to them that they get the priority. Whatever it is, this is all part of the reason why, if you beat people up too much on price, and I'm not saying to get a bad deal, But if you beat people up too much on price to the point where they're unhappy, even at the beginning of a job, guess what happens when you need to call on them? And the answer is they may not be as excited to pick up the phone. So, what we're really saying here is that there's just a lot going on downstream, things that you may not even be aware of, things that may be freak accidents or just like major accidents. I've had contractors where it's all hands on deck because something floods, or maybe there's an accident on site, or in our, climate now, maybe, you thought you could get something, but where is it? And then all of a sudden that's sort of rippling up, or, costs being higher. And then this person is getting hit by that. And then that's going up and it's going up. And guess who ends up dealing with it? And so these relationships, these core relationships, with your prime contracts are key because that is your core team. But at the same time, you need to be aware of not every single one of these individuals, but of the way the system works. Because if you're not paying your GC, say you don't pay them, and they don't pay this person, and then they're not going to pay this person. And then guess what? The material is not available, and people will stop showing up really quickly, as they should, by the way, in my opinion, because there's no room for owners to be, screwing around with payment. I was going to say something a little more strong there. But if you're an owner, your obligation, the only way that you can really jam a project up that isn't having an issue is by not paying people, because it's really simple. All you need to do is keep things going back and forth. Make sure that people are not using your money to pay, Peter to pay Paul, meaning using your money somewhere else, which is why we have oversight, which is why we make sure that we hire the contractor, a good contractor from the very beginning. We can vet them with things like an A305. We sort of test people. We ask them questions. I like asking people questions that I want them to say no to, because you don't want someone who's saying yes to everything. And so if we can do all of this stuff, then we can have a better idea of just generally what's going on in this whole process. And that's why the strategy of this matters, because you do have to pay attention to how you set the whole team up. Just like any, athletic team, just like any other business team, you're building a team here, and it has to be managed well by you as the owner. And bigger businesses have whole teams for this. That's why they do it that way. This is the reason why bigger businesses have entire development teams in-house, because you have different specialists who are watching the money, who are watching the construction. Are these people necessary? They're sort of technically not, because there are already people doing this at the level, of the contractor. But if you're someone up here who is, who knows what they're doing, that the management of this process and the way that it's managed up and downstream is so important that it's worth investing now to save much more money down the line, much more loss, not being open, having to hire another contractor, which happens. Maybe you never get open. We've all heard horror stories of architect. I'm an architect. Architects not listening. I try really hard to listen. And find a way to get to a solution that is hitting my client's needs, because these cliches are true for a reason. Same thing with contractors, same thing with, the attorneys we deal with all up and down the line. But it's relationships. And so it's about just finding the right people, having enough of an understanding of the way that this whole mess works, so that as you're moving along, you're not in a situation of just wondering, like, what is happening. A big part of this is you're not hiring robots. You're not hiring, things that are building without, input and relationships and conversations. You're hiring people, you're hiring teams. And so it impacts you because it affects how much you're paying, how quickly you get things done, when you can open, how good it is. All of these things are directly impacted by the individuals, from everybody, from the person applying the paint or sanding the drywall. You can either do a good or a bad job at that, all the way up the line. So it's not about listening to every single person. It's about understanding the relationship, sort of where people fall within the hierarchy of the process. When people are involved, like I started this by saying, oh, hire an architect. A lot of people I know who've done that basically end up spending 20, 25 grand and not getting much out of it. So I would argue that that is not a good first step, although that is a very common first step. So I think that there's a lot of different ways to look at this. I look at it as a complete project cycle. And, really that's the only way it makes sense in terms of building buildings to me. But for you as the owner, that's why it's so important to have enough awareness here so that when things are happening, you have some idea of what could be causing that, and therefore can give enough of a leash so that people can perform, and you give them enough space to, deal with whatever issue is over here, but then come back to you and hit the expectations that you can agree on, because that's the biggest thing, is setting up expectations so that you're not being disappointed by what you're getting at the end of the day. If this is helpful for you, please subscribe to the channel. That's the best thing for me, to know that people are enjoying this and getting something out of it. And I'll see you in the next video.